Welcome to Business Minds. Today we introduce you to Philippe Telio, founder of the Startupfest, the International Entrepreneurship Festival of Montreal.
Our mission is to create more entrepreneurs and better entrepreneurs. My goal is 50 people in a room, not more than that. That first event was 150 people.
He tells us the story of how he created the event and how it gained popularity over the years, as well as his vision of entrepreneurship.
Success trumps everything. It's an entrepreneurial trait to handle the risk. My biggest dream? I'm living it.
Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and enjoy the episode. Are we ready?
Yeah.
Perfect. Welcome to Business Minds. Today we're delighted to receive Philippe Telio here at the Startupfest, creator of the Startupfest in Montreal. Philippe, thank you very much for being with us today.
What a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. So first of all, we would like to ask you to define your role in the Startupfest in just a few words.
Well, so my role in Startupfest is that I'm the founder of Startupfest. We're in our 14th year of the event, and I started it, just on a whim, never having run events before.
Excellent. And so we will dig into that a bit more later. So we'd like to ask our guests what's their background, basically. So first question is very simple. Where did you grow up, and what kind of job were you dreaming to do as a kid?
That's easy, I guess. I grew up here in Montreal, but I moved around. I grew up first in Montreal, then in Hudson. Then I went to boarding school at Bishop's in Lennoxville, and then away to university, but back home to Montreal.
Excellent. And so, what kind of a job were you dreaming to do as a kid?
My dream job as a kid, I wanted to be in real estate.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it's only because the people that I saw around me in real estate seemed like they were super successful, and it just interested me. I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and it just seemed like, the entrepreneurs that I seem to appreciate the most were in real estate. So somehow real estate. I ended up by studying engineering, thinking, at the time when I was at, high school, boarding school, and we had our counselors, they were pretty smart people. And they would ask me, what do you want to do? And I would say, I'm interested in getting in real estate. Well, there's no job for real estate, unless you're a real estate agent, I guess. And they said, well, you should go into engineering, because if you know how to build buildings, then certainly you could be in a business of owning buildings. And so I said, that seems smart. And so I went and studied engineering, civil engineering, so I could get into construction, but never worked a day in my life in civil engineering.
Very, very, very funny story. And so with this background of engineering, at what point did you realize that it was clear you would be an entrepreneur at some point?
It actually took me a while. I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but it's hard to, it's certainly in the early 90s, this idea of going out and becoming an entrepreneur from scratch, there was no startup ecosystem, there was no system to create entrepreneurs. And so like every good soldier that comes out of university, I went and got a job. And I worked for tech companies. I always wanted to be, so I was working with early stage companies. I was the first of 6 employees within the company. So I was entrepreneurial, and I would get some shares in these companies and whatnot. But I was at a certain point relatively well paid, and it's hard to leave a paid job to go and become all of a sudden, I'm going to take all these risks and become an entrepreneur. But the companies that I was with at one point, we sold the business to an American company, and they were willing to take me and bring me to Seattle to work in their office in Seattle, but my wife was pregnant, and I had no interest in leaving the city. I mean, this is my city, this is my home, this is where I live, and this is where I was going to be building my roots. And so I found myself with a package, but unemployed. And that was the moment that I became an entrepreneur, because when you're unemployed now, you don't have this luxury that you're giving up. I was giving up that luxury for personal reasons, not because I wanted to become an entrepreneur. It's a much harder decision to take. So I didn't have to take that decision. It was taken for me in a sense. And so I just found myself without a job and created my own job at that point. But it wasn't to create events. That wasn't the business. I just ended up by creating a business around events.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so with all the experiences you have had then, and with the Startupfest and all these 14 years, as you said, how would you define entrepreneurship nowadays?
how would I define entrepreneurship? Well, I don't know that it's defined any different today than it was before, but entrepreneurs are people that take risks to do something new or different, and they put it generally all on the line. I mean, it's a lot of sweat, it's a lot of uncertainty, it's a lot of nerve-wracking, but that's what is it to be an entrepreneur? It's d'entreprendre. It's to take it into your hands and be the master of your destiny. And so I don't think that's changed today over what it's been throughout history, what it is to be an entrepreneur.
Excellent. And so back to the story of your career, what were the main steps between the point where you just led us just earlier and until the creation of the Startupfest? What was your career like? What was the thinking process like for you?
So when I went out on my own, I actually went out as an independent consultant. Then I grew a consulting practice where we were about, 7, 8 consultants that were consulting in strategy, technology, innovation. We were helping very large corporations adopt new technologies. This is at a time where Bell Canada was still making money off of long distance phone calls, and companies like Vonage were coming around, or Skype or ICQ, and all of a sudden people were not doing long distance minutes anymore. And so these companies, these very large corporations, were losing their revenue streams. Yellow Pages, it doesn't even exist anymore. Does anybody know what the Yellow Pages is anymore? No, but that was a big business. Yellow Pages was a huge business. So technology at that point in the mid 90s, early 2000s, technology was eating everybody's lunch. And so we had a very good business around helping these larger organizations figure out what new technologies should they be using, what should they be buying, who should they be acquiring. And I decided to run an event as a marketing tactic. I was going to bring my big clients, I was going to bring some young innovators, and it was just going to be a fun, dynamic, my goal is 50 people in a room, not more than that. That first event was 150 people. So I thought, okay, there's something interesting. I did it again, and when I did it again, it became 250 people. I did it again, and I became 350 people. And it kept on growing like this until the point we were about 700 and some odd people. We were always running it at the SAT or at the TELUS Theatre or something like that. But it got to a point where it took on a life of its own. And it just struck me, here in Montreal, we have an international jazz festival, an international comedy festival, but there was no international startup festival, which is our original name. We're called Startupfest now because that's what people started to call us. And the .com happened to become available, and it was given to me very nicely. So we became Startupfest. But originally our name was International Startup Festival, the same way we had the International Jazz Festival. That was kind of the path to creating Startupfest. And then it just took on again, a life of its own. The market was taking off for entrepreneurship and innovation and technology, and we're at the right place at the right time.
Okay, and so after all these years, what would you say is the Startupfest mission now?
Look, it's always been the same, and that hasn't changed. Our mission is to create more entrepreneurs and better entrepreneurs. That's what we strive to do. We're all about entrepreneurs. Of course, we have investors that come to the event. We've got corporate partners. We've got community partners, and everybody's important. At Startupfest. But our focus, if there's a bullseye, the center is this size, and it's entrepreneurs. And then, of course, there's layers out there that we continue to care about. But our ultimate mission today is to create opportunities for these entrepreneurs. They need money. We bring prizes, we do investments in companies. They want visibility, we bring media, they interview startups, they get visibility. They're looking to hire people, we bring in people looking for jobs. So everything's about creating the opportunities for the entrepreneurs based on the opportunities that they want. And that will change from year to year a little bit. There are some years where they're all looking to hire. There are other years where they're all looking for money this year.
Okay. And so can you give us a few numbers about the Startupfest, especially for these last few years?
Sure. So look, there's a pre-pandemic world and there's a post-pandemic world. In the pre-pandemic world, we've always been here in the old port. We've been moving around. Our biggest event was almost 7,000 people on Parc de Dieppe and Parc Jean Drapeau for 2 years. We had boats going from the old port. We put a dock back on at Parc de Dieppe, boat shuttles back and forth, 6 stages, tenting everywhere in the park. And then the pandemic hit. And at that point, everything kind of froze for the event world. There was nobody was going anywhere, nobody was leaving their houses. We were all there. And when we came back, I had no idea if there was going to be an appetite still for an event. I mean, or if we still had a community after 2-3 years. And so we chose to do something small. Going back to the first year, we said, we came here to this venue, to the Grand Quai, but we only took one stage, went back to one stage, and we went back to no technology being used with the participants, and I could only fit about 1,200 people in the space. Sold out the first event, and I didn't even market it. Of course, we had our attendee base of tens of thousands of people that had been in the past, so people knew about it, but we didn't do any heavy marketing or anything of the sort. Last year, second year after the pandemic, said, okay, well, if year one went really well, we added a second stage. We did 2 stages, and we did a larger footprint. Again, same thing. We came to capacity at around 2,500 people. Today, we're 3,000 people and 4 stages.
Wow. Okay, so yeah, I wanted to ask, have you noticed a lot of participants who come year after year?
Yes. There is easily 50% of our audience that comes back year after year. Now, some of them don't come back every year, but I would say 50% of the audience here today has been to a Startupfest at minimum before, if not all 14. There are people that have been to every event. They just come over and over and over again. And then the other 50% is new, because entrepreneurs are always born. There's no stop to that. And I always thought, when I started to run these events way back, 15, 17 years ago, I always thought, okay, we're going to reach a maximum limit. There's going to be no more startups. We will have gone through all the startups that are willing to pitch on our stage. But every year there were new startups and new startups and new startups. That doesn't stop. So there's always a 50% of people that are just new to the ecosystem, that just launched their company or are now ready to come to Startupfest. Our audience, in terms of other numbers around Startupfest, 50% of our audience is entrepreneurs. 20% of our audience is investors. The rest is service providers, partners, community leaders from across Canada and parts of the US and parts of Europe.
Okay, and looking at all of this, what will be the future goals for the Startupfest in the future? How do you see it evolving in the future?
So we evolve with the market. We evolve with what's happening. We tend to be a little bit ahead of the curve in the sense that our speakers are big thinkers. These are people that see 6 months, a year down the road before most people do. And so I don't really decide what the themes are going to be. The market dictates that. And so in the beginning, our first theme on our first event, the theme was mobile, because it was like the iPhone had been around for 3 years, and people were just starting to build applications on mobile, and that was the theme, was mobile. And then at a certain point it became big data, and then it became, artificial intelligence, more recently. We're a pretty horizontal event. We don't go very, we don't niche in just, SaaS startups or health tech startups. We're very horizontal in that sense, but it's still, the market that will dictate what the theme will be and who will be here. I don't have any grand designs where I think that I can, shape the market. So I don't have that pretension or belief.
Okay. And so now I'd like to ask you a bit more about your entrepreneurship perspective, because you've been an entrepreneur yourself, and you've met a lot throughout the Startupfest and more. How do you deal with the notion of risk? How do you handle the pressure and you carry the risk to build a startup?
It's an entrepreneurial trait to handle the risk. There's so much uncertainty when you're starting a business or when you're operating a business. Events have particular areas of risk, and there are things that you control, and there are things you don't control. And it's useless, and it's very stressful to try and control the things you don't control. And so the most important thing is, taking a calculated risk, trying to predict what your sales may be so that you buy products, so that you're ready to ship to those clients. And so risk is something you can mitigate. It's not something you can erase. There's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of unknowns to being an entrepreneur. Like I said, the events have particular unknowns. I have to choose the size of my venue. I have to choose the number of stages I'm going to do. I have to choose, how much food I'm going to order before I even know how many people are going to actually show up. So there's just predictions, use your gut, I think most entrepreneurs will use their gut and some amount of analysis and data to then take a decision. But at the end of the day, it's your gut that's telling you this is a risk worth taking, or this is a risk that'll crush me. I've never taken a risk that would put me in a peril where I would lose my house. Some entrepreneurs do take those kinds of risks, though. They have to. They have to go get a bank loan to finance their business. They believe in it so much, they put everything on the line. And so that's just, different entrepreneurs have different tolerances of risk, maybe, but it's just something you deal with. I mean, is it stressful? Are there some nights that I don't sleep so well? Of course, but I got lots of great mentors around me, people that have, knowledge, experience, insight, and just help me, think through my thought process. That helps, mitigate that risk and get comfortable with the amount of risk you're taking.
Mm-hmm. Very well. And so looking back at all of your career now, especially at the Startupfest, but even more, what are you most proud of in your career today?
What am I most proud of? That's a good question. Look, I definitely, I would have to say, the team. And I know maybe it sounds even almost cliche. I love what I do. I know we have impact on entrepreneurs. I'm proud of a lot of things that I do, but I've had the same killer core team of 5 people that have been running this event for the last pretty much 14 years. Some of them came along in year 2, not year 1, but being able to attract people that care, people that have passion, and keep them motivated, stimulated, financially rewarded, and interested. It's not easy to do the same thing, in a sense, for 14 years, right? Most people don't do one job for 14 years. But thankfully, events are an evolving, changing reality, so it's always exciting, it's always new, there's always something we can do. But my ability, I would say, to have attracted those killer people and have kept them.
Excellent. And so a bonus question now, who is your favorite entrepreneur?
Who's my favorite entrepreneur? I admire a lot of entrepreneurs. Probably my grandfather would have been my, guiding, the person that inspired me to want to become an entrepreneur. I come from a family of entrepreneurs, but even my parents worked for their father, my grandfather. So it's probably my grandfather was probably like my most admired entrepreneur. That being said, there's plenty of entrepreneurs out there that I find fascinating, living and dead. I mean, people like Steve Jobs, I think, are fascinating entrepreneurs. There's the obvious people like Elon Musk, although hyper controversial. But I think there's a lot to admire, even in the young entrepreneurs that are here at Startupfest. So it's hard for me to have one. I meet so many entrepreneurs. I admire the quality of entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs as a whole. That's my passion, why I do what I do, why I love it.
Great answer. Thank you very much for this. Now, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received, or what's the best piece of advice you would give to younger generations today?
I've received a lot of advice in my life. To distill it down to one piece of awesome advice and the most important piece of advice, I guess some of the advice. One is, you make mistakes in entrepreneurship. That happens. You make mistakes. You insult people by mistake, and they may or may not forgive you and stuff of that sort. One entrepreneur gave me the advice that, success trumps everything. And so continue to be successful, and don't worry, you'll get through those hurdles, and those people will eventually forgive you. Another piece of advice might be to, follow your passions. I mean, if you don't like what you do, if you don't love what you do, then how are you going to be a successful entrepreneur? I don't know. There's so much. I've received so much advice in my life, all valuable. I've soaked it all in.
Very good ones. Thank you. What's your favorite quote? We know it's something important for entrepreneurs.
See, these are the questions I should have read your things for. That I could have come up with a little. My favorite quotes. Look, the one that comes to mind like this, it's not a quote. It's actually a tagline. It would be just do it. I'm not wearing Nikes here. It's not like I'm a huge Nike fan, but I think that branding says a lot. It's a quote, but there's so many quotes out there. Again, you're asking me for one quote. I mean,
you can give a couple if you want.
I don't know. I'll keep it at just do it.
This is a very powerful one. Thank you for this. Now, moving to the last couple of questions of this interview, because we have to wrap up. If you could have a private meeting with someone, anyone dead or alive, who would it be?
Albert Einstein.
Interesting. How come?
I think it's somebody that marched to the beat of his own drum. And I don't think, I mean, historically, these are just perceptions you have of people. And so I don't know that you would ever consider him an entrepreneur. He was certainly an inventor and had a huge impact on people, and humanity as a whole. But that's the one person I'd probably, if I could somehow figure out a way to meet, to be Albert Einstein.
Excellent. And one last bonus question on entrepreneurship. If there was 3 things that you wish you knew before starting and becoming an entrepreneur, what would they be?
Well, I wouldn't want to have known everything that I learned along the way. Okay. It might have scared me. Might not have done it. I don't know if that answered the question, actually. Could it?
No answer is also an answer, as they say.
What was the question again?
What would be the top 3 things that you wish you knew before?
Oh, the top 3 things I wish I knew before. Yeah, it's going to be more difficult than you could imagine, and so be ready for it. You make a lot of assumptions in life that are probably wrong and shouldn't make those assumptions. Third, I don't know. I'm not very good at these things. So.
It's okay. No worries. Well, thank you very much for this. And this leads us to my last question of this interview. After everything we've said, what is your biggest dream?
My biggest dream? I'm living it. Honestly, I love what I do. I'm able to make a living doing it. I get to work with really smart people. I get to host, so I get to do what I'm doing. I'm not looking to change things, I don't know. Things will certainly evolve, things will certainly grow, I'll certainly do other things, but right now I'm just super happy doing what I'm doing.
Very inspiring. Thank you so very much. So this is the end of this interview. Thank you very much. This was Philippe Telio on Business Minds.
A real pleasure.
Thank you very much. It was so much quicker. I was like, ooh, okay.
Yeah, it worked well.
It's a lot quicker than what we usually do, but it went well. Thank you.
Good. Okay.